It goes so much deeper than just, okay, go to a chiropractor, get adjusted. You've got to make sure the muscles are balanced. So, I muscle test and strength test and make sure there's a balance between front and back, left and right, obliques, the side to side, and that everything is firing and stabilizing in its proper motions. And so we get tighter as we age. Our fibrous connective tissue sort of dries out and turns into like a beef jerky. And if we can keep that lengthened and keep it functional, you keep your mobility, you keep your function, yes, it's 100% going to affect your health and longevity.
Health, fitness, mindset, nutrition. Live better and longer. I'm Saad Alam, and let's hone in.
So today, I'm incredibly excited to welcome Dr. Christopher Vincent to Hone In. And Dr. V, we got to spend some time in my car. I was very lucky enough to do lunch with you and then drive you to the airport. But here's the thing. Ride. It was actually probably one of the best rides I've had, if I'm being perfectly honest. And one of the most exciting. And what I'm even more excited about is everyone else hearing about what it is exactly that you do, because you may live a dream life that a lot of us have kind of imagined as a child.
Yeah, well, thank you, Saad, and great to be on Hone In with you. So life is pretty exciting, and from the outside, it looks like a glamorous, great life. It's a lot of travel, a lot of hard work, and a lot of time away from home. But basically, what I do, I'm originally a chiropractor and started my life and career out as a traditional chiropractor, and was lucky enough to find myself involved with sports and athletics, and started traveling with athletes, and became the US team doctor and Olympic team doctor, and sort of started that in sports, which evolved into other sports and traveling with other athletes, which then introduced me to some actors and got me into movies. And now the evolution of that is into really managing people's health and coaching people and advising them in health, but also with specifically in longevity. And so I travel around the world and see clients and help them get on the path to longevity and increase their health and lifespan.
What's so interesting is you have worked with arguably the most influential athletes and celebrities, and you are the guy that they listen to in order to help them put them on their path. And I love the fact that you said you're now turned your focus to longevity, because it's one of the most important things that we do here at Hone. And I guess the question is, why all of a sudden has longevity become such an important part of how you treat your patients and also how you live your life personally?
Yeah, so longevity, it's kind of like the evolution of myself, my person, and my career. It's sort of like similar parts. I started off as a professional athlete. I was a track and field athlete. And, at that time, when I'm 20 years old, my focus is on performance enhancement. And the same in my career, when I started in the career, was like, how do I help these athletes perform at a higher level? And then I realized that a lot of the athletes were getting to this super high level and ready at the peak of their careers, the peak of their performance, and they get injured and miss the Olympic Games or miss the championship game or something. So my focus then shifted a little bit on injury prevention and recovery. And then as I went through my career working with athletes, the athletes were getting older. I myself was getting older. It started to shift on how do I maintain these athletes competing at this super high level for another few months, another year, another few years.
I pay a lot of attention to sports. I happen to be a diehard Lakers fan. As you know, LeBron's there right now, and he's now in his 17th or 18th year in the league, and he just continues to defy what we thought was possible before. And I think it's in large part a very real theme that we're starting to see across not only basketball, but I'd argue like the entire world, which is athletes and I would say people and celebrities, they're defying what we used to think was old age. Like now you hear 50 and you're like, man, that guy's got another 20, 30 years of sprinting ahead of him at full speed.
Yeah, it's amazing. And And I remember, I haven't ever worked with the Lakers, but I've done a lot of work with the Clippers. So they're hometown rivals. But Chauncey Billups once said to me, as I was working with him the last couple of years of his career, he was like, man, I wish I started doing this stuff when I was 20. And I think that's, now the athletes are learning that it's like, you better start doing some of these things. And a lot of the training rooms and the athletic trainers are implementing sort of protocols to help extend the careers of these athletes, to help them recover, to help them maintain, to prevent injuries. So we're going to see, I think, more and more as technology and awareness grows, we're going to see more commonly the aging athlete, the older athlete.
I ended up meeting Thaddeus Young out in LA a couple of weeks at an event, and he's been in the league, right, 17 years about that. And he said he carries around a bag with him, and that bag's got about $100,000 worth of equipment. And whenever he meets a rookie coming into the league, he tells them, I've been doing one thing consistently for 17 years, and that is getting up at 5 a.m., training, make sure that I spend an hour and a half to 2 hours within recovery. And I have a very structured way to approach my life because this is my job. And it's in large part the reason why I've had so much longevity behind my career. Can you comment on, I guess, what are some of the best longevity principles that are easy to integrate into your life? And maybe even, let me take a step back. If you could only choose 3 longevity principles based upon everything you've seen, what would those 3 be?
Yeah. 300, did you mean 300 or just 3? There's so many. But I think, to give you a kind of condensed basis, I like to look at things in the SAID principles, not the Saad principles. I'm sure you have your own principles, but these are SAID principles, SAID, which is specific adaptation to imposed demands. So basically what that means is let's challenge the system and challenge every system. I think that, we're all familiar with, if we want to improve in sports, we have to train hard and we challenge our cardiovascular system, or in the gym, we'll challenge ourselves lifting a little heavier than normal. But I like to look at it across the board of let's challenge every system we have. Our bodies like to get into this sort of homeostasis, this set point where it's comfortable, a comfortable body temperature, comfortable sort of breathing, respiratory rate or heart rate. And we need to challenge those systems. And I think if for longevity, if you think of nothing else but to challenge those systems on a daily, weekly basis, you'll help to increase your resilience and also increase your longevity.
And if you had to, I guess, going back to the question, how are you stressing those systems?
So getting down specifically, so the thermogenesis or the thermoregulatory system, will challenge that with ice baths, or with the other extreme, we'll challenge it with hot saunas. And not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to have the, $20,000 ice bath or the $150,000 cryo chamber. You can simply take a cold shower at the end of your shower, or on a cold day. I mean, I live here in Colorado, and there's some days that it's pretty frosty outside, and you just go outside in your t-shirt and run around the block, and you get your body adapted to this. I've been hearing a lot lately, and I've still got to do my research on this. There are some benefits. I don't believe as much as getting into a cold plunge, but there are some benefits of just getting up in the morning and filling a bowl of ice water and sticking your face in it. I'm sure that has a nice little anti-inflammatory effect on your face and gets rid of the sort of overnight puffiness. But so it's challenge the system, challenge your respiratory system with hyperventilating and then holding your breath, and hypoxia, challenging, can your system run at too much oxygen? Can your system run at too little oxygen? The digestive system, can you stress it? Can you challenge it? And there's been a lot of studies, this has become pretty popular lately, of both intermittent fasting, but also the water fasting for 24, 48, 72 hours, or even 7 days. I mean, that gets a little sketchy when you're pushing that, and I wouldn't suggest doing that without sort of supervision from a professional. But there's been studies that show if you are fasting for a period of time, different things happen throughout your body. For example, the growth hormone goes up at a certain level. Your body goes into ketosis, and after a certain amount of hours, like 24 hours, you start to go into autophagy, which is breaking down of old stagnant cells, these senescent cells that are like zombie cells just sitting in your system. And before we still are looking for this magic drug or the magic pill that will eliminate these cells from your body. But if we can just do a 24-hour fast every now and then and start to kill off some of these mutated cells, I think we'd have a tremendous effect on future longevity and the function of our bodies.
And so what you're basically saying, and by the way, I agree with your philosophical approach, is if you put the right kind of stresses on your body, it forces us to readapt in essence, meaning our bodies don't get complacent, and they, whether it's remove senescent cells, whether they are reducing inflammation through cold baths, it is not just, hey, eat this pill. It's put a little bit of stress on your body, stretch it from different directions to make it constantly evolve. And that's really the key to longevity.
100% agree. It's like we get too comfortable. The world has become too comfortable. Our thermostats are always at 69 degrees or whatever's the perfect temperature in your house. And, we're always got food available. It's like our lives have become too convenient and our bodies become too lazy. We're never challenged. So I think challenging that system, and the way you put it perfectly, is you stretch those systems and it makes you more resilient.
I can, by the way, comment on face ice baths because many people don't know this, but I actually do one every single morning. And I've been doing it for a while actually as well. When you first start, you definitely get a brain freeze. I'm not going to lie. And you got to hold your breath, go under 30 seconds, maybe a minute. I can do about a minute now. It definitely reduces the puffiness of your face. But the reason I did it is because I heard Dave Asprey basically say that you have a bunch of heat receptors in the forefront of your face, and that by doing it, you release heat shock or cold shock proteins. And I went and dove into the literature, and there actually isn't any literature on it, which is what's so interesting. You basically see a bunch of articles on Bella Hadid and one of the Kardashians practicing this before they put makeup on, but there's no deep research on it per se. Have you seen anything?
Yeah, there's a researcher out of Denmark who's done a lot of cryotherapy, cryogenics, sort of looking at the thermogenesis effect, and there's a few other pieces of research. I still have to find the research and maybe there isn't, maybe this is just anecdotal evidence and the Kardashians mentioning it or people mentioning it that, oh yes, it's the same effect because they don't want to get their whole bodies into an ice bath. But so I haven't found the actual face ice bath research, but I have found some literature on, if you sleep at a colder temperature and you just have your face exposed, how it increases the brown fat. Or if you go out to the cold in the wintertime with too little clothes on, your body adapts to produce more heat with the brown fat in your body. And the same works with saunas and heat that you cool. There's also the cold shock proteins, which I believe are the sirtuins. So that's sort of the cellular effect that the cold baths or the saunas will have on your bodies. These sirtuins are what's repairing your actual cells, your DNA. So it's repairing you at a cellular level. So there's so many benefits to heat or cold, those extremes. We've got to balance this conversation with a sleep conversation, as that's another huge part of longevity and recovery and resilience.
Tell me about the sleep part of it.
So, I did a lot of work with Arianna Huffington when she was writing her book on sleep and her Thrive book. And it's funny because it was at a time where I was so stressed. I was building my business and had sleep issues myself. And I'm helping right parts of her Thrive program. And I wasn't sleeping myself. So I was like a bit of a hypocrite doing all this research. Like, you got to do this, you got to do this. And I was like sleeping 2 hours a night. And I missed a flight one time. I fell asleep in an airport. I was sitting at the gate, just so tired, I zonked out. So anyway, now I have sort of my own experience and how I overcame that and what I did. But part of this research and studies was, if you can fall asleep within 3 minutes of putting your head down on your pillow, you're probably sleep deprived. If you need an alarm to wake you up in the morning, you're probably sleep deprived. And I know you both have, you and I both have these dual wearables, but you can look at the quality of your sleep. So you need this sort of not just 8 hours of sleep or whatever the typical sleep is. You've got to make sure you're getting this very high quality restorative sleep, both the REM sleep and the deep sleep. And as you probably have already found out, there's things that affect that sleep, whether it be food that you eat, the time that you eat, the consistency of when you go to bed, the consistency of when you wake up, any kind of alcohol or drinks that you drink, too much water, too little water, all these have an effect on the quality of your sleep.
I'll tell you, my biggest problem is I get about 7% of my night, if I get lucky, in deep sleep. And no matter what I've done, and I think I have a really high quality sleep routine, magnesium threonate beforehand, bedroom goes to 65 degrees. I have a sleep mask, one of the manta masks. My dogs love it. They think it's the funniest thing. And then I also meditate before I go to sleep. And I'm maybe now realizing I'm sleep deprived because I fall asleep within 3 minutes of me starting. But I guess the question is, do you have any tips for someone that is struggling with their deep sleep, how maybe they can improve it a little bit?
So, I mean, I think just the things that you mentioned there are key components to a good night's sleep. So adding to that, I would play with the time that you eat. And if we could get 4 hours before you go to sleep or before you go to bed, that would be great. I think there's also, your body releases different hormones through different sleep cycles throughout the night. And the morning sort of hormone that's released is cortisol. And I think a lot of times we're like, okay, I'm done with the sleep. You wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is, get on your phone and, immediately your heart rate goes up and oh my God, I have all these messages and all these things I've got to reply to. And so I like to, first of all, have the phone outside of the bedroom. So there's no temptation to even look at it at night. Don't use it as a clock or have that excuse where I just got to look at the time. And it's like, you look at the time and, some message comes up and then your sleep is screwed. But also, first thing in the morning, you want to reduce that cortisol. So that's another benefit to the ice bath. It's a huge benefit, not only doing your breathing or your breath work or your mindfulness or your meditation in the evenings. You want to start off your day with that, so it doesn't immediately spike the cortisol. I think having light stimulation first thing in the morning is also important, where you get outside and, as the sun's coming up, you're getting stimulated with that light, and it sort of suppresses the melatonin and increases all the awake hormones. So the morning routine is almost as important as your nighttime routine.
And what's your morning routine?
And it's similar to that. I'll get up, I'll get outside, and usually I'm, and during the summer, the sun beats me up a lot of days, but I try and get that sunlight. Then I go into our back room and I start doing my sort of breathing and yoga, sort of stretches. It's not typical yoga, but it's my own routine of what I've sort of, my tightest, most restricted areas, focus on that. And then I'll do my exercise. And so I've got my breathing, a little bit of meditation, a little bit of my flexibility. Oh, and I have my espresso. So I'll do all that, and then I'll have my morning espresso, and then it's exercise. And then after my run, then the phone is on and I'm starting to check the messages. So I try and hold off that until the end of that. And there's a client that I worked with for many years who I really fought to try and get to sleep more. Bob Iger, who's the chairman of Disney, he sleeps about 4 hours a night. And there are some people who have like a little bit of a genetic mutation where 4 hours is perfectly enough sleep. I believe he's one of these people, but I always was fighting him to, okay, we need to sleep more. We need to work on this. We need to do your meditation anymore. You need to, and some people have their own plan, their own program that doesn't look like a traditional meditation. It doesn't look like a typical breathing or mindfulness technique or something, but he had his own technique that I guess simulated what I would call breath work and what I would call meditation, which I would call exercise. And one thing that he was incredibly good at is he didn't look at his emails or turn his phone on until after he'd finished his whole morning routine.
Two things I'm dying to know. The first is, you said you've kind of created or Frankensteined your own approach, which I've done something very similar, just because I'd love to try what you're doing. What's like the rough piece by piece version of what you do?
In a full 24-hour period, day
No,
period?
I'm almost thinking very
just
specifically specifically in the morning when you wake up. You said you have your own meditation, stretching routine. What does that look like?
So I start off, I'll come and I'll get outside. So I get the light stimulation and shutting off that sort of sleep hormones.
Yep.
And that's just, spending a few minutes outside, walking around, some light breathing, getting my body sort of moving. And then I get into stretches, and they're specific stretches. My hip flexors are notoriously tight and my hips. And so I'll do a lot of psoas release and hip flexor stretches, a little glute stretches and shoulder and pec stretches. And then I'll get into my breath work, which I do the holotrophic breathing, which is that rapid breathing, the kind of the Wim Hof technique. So where I'll take 30 rapid breaths and then exhale and hold. And I usually do 3 rounds of that. And then I'll get up and I'll start my espresso. I'm a terrible or great coffee addict or connoisseur, whichever one. I don't know if it's a connoisseur of coffee or it's an addict. It's a little bit of my addiction, but I love a great espresso. So I'll then go, and it takes me about 10 minutes to make that. And so I have a little bit more downtime, and then I'll prepare for my run. I've got a lot into gravel bike riding since I've moved to Boulder. And, I was never a big road biker just because I hated to be on the road with drivers. But here around Boulder, there's hundreds of miles of these gravel roads. So I recently got this incredible bike from Specialized, and I love just going out on the gravel rides and doing an 2-hour bike ride.
Is there any specific benefit that the gravel bike ride provides? Because I'm a road biker, and the only problem with it, it's very much a straight, easy ride for the most part, at least where I ride.
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit to it is you're less likely to have a truck smash up into your ass. I think that may be the number one benefit is get off the road. But I think, some of these rides out here, I mean, I'm riding on these gravel roads that are through nature and through trees and, mountains in the background, little snow caps. So you're getting that forest bathing at the same time, that sort of that being in nature as opposed to being on asphalt and sucking up exhaust fumes from cars. Or in terms of my actors, how do we keep these aging actors still looking great and doing their own actions, movies, or their own stunts, and how do we extend those careers? And at the same time, once you turn 50, any of you 50-year-olds out there, you get a little awakening like, oh my gosh, I better start looking after this body. It's the only one I've got. And, it's not as easy to just go out and run a 10K like you used to 5-10 years ago, or, play soccer with your kids or whatever. There's repercussions to it. You're always a little more sore, a little more fatigued. And so I've fortunately been able to have clients that have the means to send me anywhere in the world to research products and research different ways to extend their careers or their athletic endeavors. And of course, I have to test them myself. And and see how they work out and the sort of side effects to them and the benefits to them.
So you work with the best of the best. And let's say right after we get off this conversation, someone gives you a call and they say, hey, Dr. V, I want you to come help this particular person get ready for the biggest film or movie of their career. What's your treatment framework? What does that even look like? And how do you think about who that individual is, what you need to put them through? I guess describe the process, because to me, that's like some of the most interesting inside baseball.
Well, I'll give you a real live example on this. 2000, I think it was 2015 or something. I was at my office, and we'd done a lot of movies at that time and worked with a lot of athletes. And I got a call from a producer who I'd worked with in another movie, and he's like, "Hey, I've got this great job. I need your help." And I'm like, "Okay, what is it?" And he was producing Star Wars Episode 7, and he's like, "We're bringing back a lot of the old actors, but we're also introducing a whole load of new actors, and I need to get them ready." And so my kind of process to that is like, okay, how much time do we have? What state are they in? What are we starting with? And what do they need to accomplish? Where do they need to be? So then I'll meet with the director and I'll get his visual for what he thinks the actors should look like and what they should do. How active are they? What have they been doing? They have to tell the story in a small piece, a small frame of time, a small window of time. But this story has gone on for years. So the actor may be, a great sword fighter or great with a staff and stick. They've got to look like they've been doing that their whole lives. So they can't walk out there with zero muscle tone in their forearms or their arms or shoulders and convince an audience that they are really proficient with a sword. So I get the idea of what the director's looking for. And then I go and meet with the stunt coordinator. And I'm like, okay, how physical do these actors have to be? What are the stunts they're going to be required to do? And even actors that don't typically do their own stunts. There are some actors that I've worked with that are notorious for they're doing their own stunts. But even when they're not doing their own stunts, an action movie is still incredibly physical. They're filmed, we shoot for 12 hours a day, and it's day after day after day. And sometimes we shoot 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. Sometimes we're shooting at night, sometimes we're shooting in the day. Sometimes we'll shoot a scene 40 different times. So they're having to do this event 40 times in one day and then go the next day and repeat it, which is very different from an athlete's perspective, where you can train for an event, boom, you do your event, and then you get to recover until the next event. A lot of actors have not trained properly to get there in the first place, and then repetitively doing it. It's incredibly challenging. So once I figured out exactly what's required and what's needed, then I'll meet with the actors and evaluate kind of how far they are look-wise. Do they need to gain weight? Do they need to lose weight? Do they need to gain muscle? Do they need to look more athletic? Do they need to be more flexible? And then we look at the stunts and the actions that they're required to do for the movie. And I remember starting on Star Wars, I got through all the steps and I evaluated all the actors. And Harrison Ford was the fittest one of the bunch, and he was 74 years old. And J.J. Abrams had chosen actors that were great actors, but they were non-athletes. And Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill, who sort of hadn't been filming and working in movies for years, were totally out of shape. And so I went back to the producer and I'm like, okay, you gave me 3 months. I need a year to get all of these people ready. There's absolutely no way. And he said, well, Chris, lucky for you, the movie just got pushed 3 months. So now you have 6 months. That's all you got, get it done. So, we starved them, we pushed them, we trained them. We took John Boyega, we took him up into the mountains in California and stuck him in a cabin for 2 weeks, and he didn't see any other. We had a trainer with him and all the nutrition he needed. And It's like we went through extremes to get these actors ready. And, now you look at the end result. I mean, it's incredible. They were fit and strong and active and doing stunts and activity. It was amazing.
I think the predominant thought is so much of it is quote unquote not real, or there's a lot of what I'll call a lot of gear that athlete, or I'd say celebrities, are taking. And the reality is you're saying like, no, we put them through all this stuff that we're talking about. Like what you're seeing is the culmination of a tremendous amount of discomfort that they put themselves through in order to prepare themselves for us.
Yeah, no, totally. And the ones that are most dedicated, I mean, you'll see the movies, the ones that are really known as the action heroes, they put the work in, and they're training all year, even without a movie scheduled. They're maintaining, so they're prepared and they can get their bodies to a certain place within weeks.
Last question, I promise. What is the difference in your approach between, let's say, a 25-year-old athlete, someone who is arguably in the prime of their life, versus a 74-year-old Harrison Ford?
I think it's recovery time. Recovery time is the biggest thing. When you're 25 years old, you bounce back and you recover from almost everything and anything. When you're a Harrison Ford, you're pretty unique, because I worked with him after his plane crash, and where he broke almost every bone in his body and his spine, and he was in a coma. I mean, he was just wrecked. 6 months later, we had him doing stunts and running in Blade Runner. And so he's a unique specimen. But I think in general, it's the recovery time. You need to implement more biohacks and do more things to focus on the recovery, so you can come back and do the activity, the stunts, the action the next day.
I've got to imagine biohacks are different for each person because they're so individual in terms of what their body reacts to. Or is it really one biohack that is your go-to for every single person?
So yes, it's different specifically for everybody. And you have to make sure the top level is working, that you're doing the top level of things, the nutrition, the exercise, the breathing, the sleep. You do the top level. Once you get down to the next level, it's a lot of what you do, where you're looking at biomarkers, you're looking at blood, you're balancing those things. Then you can get to the biohack, the real little minutiae of biohacking. And I'll use every trick in the book, with for example, the blood flow restriction cuffs. I've used those for my 75-year-old, 80-year-old actors, and I've used those for my 22-year-old NBA players who rupture their Achilles. And the results are phenomenal, but I'm including everything else. So it's never just, this is my one thing that's the reason why. I'm including everything. I mean, I guess if I had less pertinent, got to get you ready for the game or get you ready for the Olympics, I'd have more time to test out, okay, let's try this thing for 3 months and then we'll try this and we'll see which one really works. We're always under the gun. It's like, it's got to go. I need you competing in 2 weeks at the Olympic, finals. So there's no time to spare. We're throwing everything, throwing even the kitchen sink in there to get it all in. They're trying it all.
So let's take me, for example. I get a lot of tissue work done. I found a woman, her name is Cece. She works at the local massage parlor. She is a 68-year-old Asian woman that's probably 4'11", but every time I go to her, which is every week, I walk away in pain and I constantly have to tap out. I say, Cece, stop. And we always laugh about it.
Yeah.
Do you think that I should be having tissue work done in addition to seeing a chiropractor? Is that really the right recipe?
100%. I mean, I sort of, the way I work is I include just about everything in my, briefcase. But for me, myself, I have the same as you. I have my soft tissue specialist. I go to see 2 different chiropractors. I go to one chiropractor who is so great and very specific at adjusting, and he adjusts really moves joints. And then I go to another chiropractor who's a little bit more into body balancing, and he's looking at tissue fascial trains and stripping fascia and lengthening things. So it's finding your group of therapists that can help you. Now, not to say that most of this can't be done on your own with a very diligent, dedicated program. When I was an athlete and competing, I fortunately had this, which I called my witch doctor, which was a woman who had incredible healing ability, but also could align my body in certain ways. And it was similar to a chiropractor, but she wasn't a chiropractor, and she did tissue work and she did adjustments and did all this. But she coached me and taught me when I was on the road, because I was a track and field athlete and we competed all over the world. And we never had therapists with us, until I started doing it with my athletes, but we never had somebody so you had to learn how to take care of your own body and learn what tools to use. And so I would sort of put 2 tennis balls in a stocking and twist them together and use the balls, or I'd take a foam roller, or I'd use a piece of plastic pipe, or different ropes and bungee cords and different things to be able to keep my body stretched, aligned, and in place. So it's really important to be in tune with your body and know what your body needs, and not just rely on the practitioner or your doctor to go, "Oh, this isn't good," or whatever you said before.
I couldn't agree with that more, that you have to be your own advocate first and foremost. But you definitely did convince me to make sure I see a chiropractor more regularly to figure out if it could actually improve my performance, especially now that I'm in my 40s. It feels like I can still put heavy weight on, I can still run really fast, and I'm still athletic. But the problem is, once I get hurt, which happens far more often, I mean, it's a weekly occurrence, if I'm being perfectly honest. I guess the question too is, when should someone start seeing a chiropractor, and how regularly should they see them?
I think you should start seeing a chiropractor in your 4th to 6th months in uterus. So before you're born. Saying that a little facetiously, but my first daughter was breech, and we were getting right to the end where the doctor was like, "Okay, we're scheduling a C-section. There's no way the baby will turn now." And I was like, "I'm sure, I've heard of chiropractors turning babies, and I've heard of all this stuff." So I researched and I found this chiropractor in LA that was acclaimed sort of baby turner. And we went to see this guy, and he spent, I think, no more than 2 minutes with my wife. And I'm the type of chiropractor that spends an hour with patients. And he was there for 2 minutes. He rubbed on a couple of things. He had this table that sort of declined, and sat her up, and he goes, "Oh, there you go, baby's turned." And I'm like, "Oh, you are a quack." I'm like, I told you I was a chiropractor, right? I know what you're doing." And he's like, "Yep, he was Jewish, and he was like, "I'll eat my yarmulke if this baby hasn't turned." I'm like, "Oh my God, this is crazy. Let's get out of here. Pay the bill, let's get out." The next day we go back to my wife's doctor, and she's doing an ultrasound. She's like, "Oh my God, I've never seen this. The baby's turned." And so basically, now looking back at the science of it, he just lengthened the round ligaments, which is a ligament that holds the uterus. And when they're super tight, it compresses the apex of the uterus, or the lower part of the uterus. So there's not enough space. The baby doesn't want to turn and put his head down there. He released those ligaments, opened up the uterus. The baby had plenty of room to swim around and turn. So I think that not only to help the baby as the baby's growing and turning and doing whatever, but also a mother, when they're pregnant, release different hormones and relaxing hormones. It's the one time that we can really fix everything, almost anything in the body, because of the release of all those hormones. So I think it's great to go to a chiropractor while you're pregnant, and then after birth, adjust the mother's pelvis and help everything sort of come back together nicely. I think will prevent injuries and degeneration down the road if you do that. But also the birthing process is pretty traumatic for a little tiny body. And so just being able to align and move those little bodies around, I think is incredibly beneficial.
Let's say my parents completely neglected me and forgot to see a chiropractor when I was in utero, or for the first 40 years of my life. Too late to get started? Will I start getting the benefits?
No, too late. You're done.
Oh,
Sorry, God.
God.
Or you can hire me and I'll come and spend 6 months with you. No, definitely not. I think there's benefits. There's millions of people who are perfectly healthy and super athletes and go through great life and athletic careers with never seeing a chiropractor. I can't believe it. I don't know how, but there are those people out there. So no, I don't think it's too late. I think, for as we're aging and, you're saying that your injuries are starting to creep up. I think that's a big cause of aging, is because we get injured. We don't allow ourselves enough time to recover between workouts, or we push ourselves too hard. And it may not be pushing yourself too hard in a specific activity or sport, but if you're not getting enough regenerative sleep, if you're too stressed at work and you've got too much cortisol in your system, then your body can't recover as much. So there's so many different, or your nutrition, or your gut health, or there's so many different factors that contribute to your recovery. So you've got to make sure that you're recovering. And then when you get an injury, you've got to recover from that as quickly as possible. And it's those little injuries over a longer period of time that cause you to age, because you don't quite get back to that same level of health and fitness as you did. Like if you're out with a hamstring pull or, a knee flare up and you're out for a month, it's very hard to get back to the level you're at, especially if you're 60, 70, 80 years old. And that's when you see the biggest deterioration, is these small injuries.
So let's say, and I'm not asking for myself, I'm just saying someone did a backflip at a wedding 15 years ago and dislocated their shoulder because they couldn't land it. And they've had these consistent shoulder injuries. And the reality is they don't have access to the guy that's helped someone win an Olympic medal or been responsible for some of our, I would say, most prized celebrities crushing bad guys and villains in some of the biggest movies. Can I go to a normal chiropractor? Do they have these skills? Because I guess the biggest question is, do you guys all learn the same thing in chiropractor school?
First of all, let me ask you, can you still do a backflip?
I haven't tried since then, but in my head, my fiance says my toxic trait is I pretend doing backflips and things I can't do anymore in my head. And I feel like I always say I can do that.
Yeah, well, that's, I think, another piece of longevity, is believing that you can still do things. Once you get to the point where you accept you're old and you can't do it, it's a downward spiral. So keep that positivity, keep that belief. But not all chiropractic schools are the same, and not all students are the same. I think that there are thousands and millions of great chiropractors, but like in any profession, you're going to find great ones, you're going to find mediocre ones, and you're going to find bad ones. So, you have to try a few out. If you know somebody who's going to a chiropractor, or you can get a referral to somebody who they like, I would start there. But if it works for somebody else, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. So be open and try other people and other modalities. I'm incredibly open to, for your shoulder, yes, let's evaluate it. Let's see what's going on. Let's see if there's any ligaments or tendons still torn, if there's any muscle imbalances, or actually the whole shoulder complex, the movement could be imbalanced. Let's look at that and see what exercises you need to do to strengthen that. But also maybe let's try acupuncture, or, trying the local cold therapy or local heat, or, specific movements. Just your posture, how you hold yourself during the day. If you're sitting at a desk a lot, or you're reading or looking down at your phone, just that dominant postural trait can affect the recovery of your shoulder. So there's so many ways to look at something. And even though I'm a chiropractor, I'll always look at what else is out there and what other modalities can we use. And sometimes it's a combination of 2 or 3 things.
I guess, another question too, when we were driving, you had said that there are actually a bunch of different things that people can do to reverse the aging process at a cellular level. And when I heard that, my ears obviously perked up, because we're in the business of longevity. I'm trying to live longer. And, to your point, I just do want to comment on something. When we started Hone, I went and interviewed 150 men that were between 20 and 60 years old. And I basically asked them about their views on longevity. And there was one very important fact that I found, and this is going to mirror exactly what you just said. For the men that didn't look at age as a number that pulled them down, and they said like, oh, I don't feel like I'm 60. I feel like I'm 20 in my head. They all looked that way. And for the 40-year-old man that said, man, I feel like I'm a 60-year-old, they looked that way too. And I think one of the most important things that I took away is that so much of your youth and your longevity comes to the mindset, and that the one that you kind of place on your life every single day.
Yeah, I think, and I, believe that in wholeheartedly throughout my life is like your mind is so powerful. And, and when I write programs for people or trying to coach people, I use the 90-10 rule. So it's like, let's be dedicated to this plan 90% of the time. And I really want you 10% of the time to be off the plan. Just go off it and live life. Because I think people who are so rigid and so restrictive are losing that psychosocial benefit, that being able to go out to a birthday party and celebrate and eat cake or drink a glass of champagne or whatever it is, you're missing such a connectivity with other people, and that part of life is so important. And then another aspect of what you're saying, that people who believe and have this young mentality actually stay younger. And I was amazed at the school here. She must have been 8 years old. We moved from the LA Unified School District into the Boulder District, and it was a phenomenal difference in the quality of education and teachers and everything. But one of my daughter's teachers had written a book on positive self-talk. Mm-hmm. And it fascinated me, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is the age we need to be learning this stuff. That's the age, because once they've instilled it at that age, it's the rest of your life. And that positive voice, we've all got this voice in our heads. And if we can, even at my age or our age, if we can change those negative thoughts to positive thoughts or override them, we're not just one day going to be saying, okay, I'm not going to have any more positive or negative thoughts. I'm going to get rid of all my negative thoughts. It's impossible. So what you start with was, when that negative thought comes up, you override it with a positive thought. And there's a great book. I don't know if it was you that mentioned it or one of my other clients, that you cannot afford the luxury of a negative thought. The impact is so detrimental on your self, your ego, your body, everything, that if you're having persistent negative thoughts, you've got to change something and maybe get out in nature and do your tree hugging or whatever you need to do, but get out there. And exercise helps to kind of relieve stress and clear some of that downward doom negativity. But just start by backing every negative thought up with a positive thought. Just come up with anything, as ridiculous as it may be, just a positive thought. And, when your doctor tells you, oh, this is pretty bad, we've got to change that narrative. You've got to come up with something more positive. And I think, a lot of chiropractors, I believe there's a need for all types of medicine, whether it be pharmaceuticals, whether it be surgery, whether it be yoga, whether it be, all types of therapy. But it's also, I think chiropractors have a way of looking at things in a positive light. It's always coming from, okay, let's try this first. Let's try the least detrimental and the least invasive, and let's do this first and work our way down, which is sort of how I operate. And I kind of live by that rule. It's like, let's not go immediately to 0 to 100 stress. Let's try and keep that at like 20 and see how bad it is, and see if it's not quite as bad as we thought.
I always tell people less is more if you do it in a strategic and thoughtful manner. And there's no reason to go to DEFCON 5 right away. It actually has a lot of negative impacts because it could cause too much stress. You may get to DEFCON 5 and realize, hey, look, this wasn't the thing that worked. You lose hope. There's just so many kind of downstream impacts. But I want to bring it because I could talk about positive self-talk for hours. And I truly believe it is one of the most important unlocks to just making you happy in the worst of circumstances, because it's all the way you frame it in your mind. But the one thing I want to bring it back to is we had talked about how it is possible to reverse the aging process at a cellular level. And I'd love for you to tell people about your thoughts on it.
We've gone through the evolution of aging, and as we've learned about aging, we've gone through many different theories, and we used to think it was specifically nutrition, or specifically high fat diets, or all these different sort of theories of what causes aging or inflammation, and all of them are valid, and all of them have some aspect of aging. My top 3 kind of aging factors that I tell people to change, that you can have the biggest impact in change, first of all, is inflammation. Reduce inflammation in your body. The typical American diet is 20-to-1 inflammatory to anti-inflammatory markers. So we've got to change our nutrition so it's at least a 1-to-1 balance. So reduce the inflammation. That's a big part of aging. The second one I would say would be sugar. Like, sugar has a detrimental effect on so many of our systems. It's directly correlated to Alzheimer's and dementia, and cardiovascular disease and everything. So if we can eliminate simple sugars, or definitely reduce them, that has a huge impact. And the third one is cortisol, is a stress hormone. So reducing your stress is a huge impact. Once you've got rid of the macros, you're exercising, you're eating healthy, you're sleeping, you've got an anti-inflammatory drug. Once you've sort of taken care of the macros, then we can start to look at cellular level stuff. And the latest research has shown that aging is a kind of a factor of a breakdown of our DNA, or our epigenome. So our genes become methylated or slightly deteriorated. And then as they replicate, the cells are supposed to be identical to daughter cells, identical to the parent cell. And every 90 days, we're a replica of ourselves. We've completely regenerated all our cells. And so we should be getting younger every 90 days, because we've got brand new cells in our system. They're not worn out. And what happens is we're not getting younger because our DNA is starting to break down. And so we're making a copy of a slightly mutated cell, or slightly broken down cell. So sometimes these cells become too mutated. So the body locks them down and they become senescent cells, because they're in danger of becoming a cancer cell, or a cell that doesn't function properly. So the body just isolates it and switches it off. So if we can reverse some of this methylation or breakdown of the DNA, and there's numerous pharmaceutical companies working on a drug that will help to reverse this by eliminating the senescent cells or regenerating the DNA. A product that is out on the market right now is NAD plus, or sort of adding NAD. Our body, by the time we're 50, is 50% of the NAD levels we had when we were 18. So if we can supplement with NAD, or get NAD into the cells, we're going to reverse some of this cellular aging. And the most recent studies that I've looked at on this is not the fact that we're actually losing NAD, because NAD is recycled in the body. So what is happening is we're losing the ability to regenerate or recycle the NAD. So we're losing the enzymes that actually recycle NAD. So as opposed to just taking a NAD supplement or getting an infusion of NAD, which will definitely help increase your levels of NAD, but then it declines. It would be more beneficial to take a supplement that helps to regenerate the engines, switch the engines back on by supplementing the enzymes or reformatting the production of these enzymes so you can recycle your NAD. So yes, take NAD supplements, find a supplement. There's one that's on the market out of the UK called Nishido. The product is Time Plus, and they specifically supplement NAD, but they also work on the enzyme of reformulating and reproducing your own NAD. And then another aspect of it is, let's get rid of these senescent cells, these zombie cells. We used to think they were just dormant cells sitting in your body. Now we've discovered that they actually secrete an enzyme, which is a very inflammatory enzyme. And so these cells that are just sitting in your body, dormant or shut down, are having an increased inflammatory effect on your system, and thus provoking further degeneration in your body and brain. And a simple way to eliminate these is that 24-hour fast, 48-hour fast. Your rate of autophagy goes up 300% once you go from 24 to 48-hour water fast only. And autophagy is the breaking down and elimination of these senescent cells.
It's interesting. I spend a lot of time thinking about how can I actually increase my longevity, and I look at about 300 different biomarkers and try supplementing with everything that I've found out there. We sell injectable subcutaneous NAD. I take oral NAD, which in large part is kind of useless. And I do a lot. I would say I do more NMN using Sinclair's protocol. I actually get NAD infusions every 3 weeks. And I would actually argue your point is 100% right. The infusion gives me a rush of energy for about 2 weeks. And quite literally, I can feel my body metabolizing it. I'm actually one of those periods where I'm not running as hard as I normally run, meaning mentally and physically, because I know that those levels have come down pretty dramatically. And I fast regularly as well too, to remove senescent cells. But we are in this very interesting period of time right now where I think that there's a large pharmaceutical push to develop drugs that do a lot of this for us. Have you heard of any that are particularly promising? And I know there's a lot of different ones out there, so it may be hard to pinpoint one.
I haven't heard of, for senescent cells specifically, I haven't heard of one that is actually working without severe side effects. I may just be missing it, but I think there very soon there'll be a number of them on the market. And was that, do you know a drug that's already?
I agree with you actually, that I'm pretty sure the ones we've seen have seen early excitement for phase 1 trials.
Yeah.
But I think that in large part, what the problem is if you're finding a way to kill zombie cells, you're killing a bunch of other things too. That's the bigger problem, is how do you just target the senescent cells? And
they are very close. I believe in the next year, we'll see one of these products on the market. There are other, as a chiropractor, we're not allowed to prescribe drugs. So I kind of I deal a lot with supplements, but I don't work with many drugs. But metformin has got a lot of buzz lately, and I think that's having a huge effect. And in my theory of glucose and high sugar levels, I think that's the way that drug is working, is making you less susceptible to sugar, removing sugar, or making your insulin receptors more potent.
Yeah, metformin's a really interesting one. We actually sell it, and there are a series of studies that confer longevity upon individuals, and there's some series of studies that are maybe almost like the jury's not out completely, meaning some people that take metformin see reduced aerobic capacity, and it's for a specific age demographic. But it was such a small study. It ended up in the New York Times. I think it was the N had to be like 50 or so. The most interesting, I don't know if you saw this, this happened today actually, but they found that 17,000 patients in Europe taking a GLP-1 actually had 20% fewer cardiovascular events. I mean,
Oh,
massive.
wow.
And I think
Wow.
what we're about to see is once they can figure out some of the safety side effects with the GLPs or the tolerability issues, meaning it just makes you very nauseous for a large group of people, and they can figure out the cost piece of this, those will become the new metformins that people are taking, because to your exact point, they are reducing overall insulin sensitivity in your body and making sugars operate a little bit more efficiently. And those will be the things that we take to stay alive a little bit longer.
In the meantime, reduce the amount of sugar you're eating.
There you go.
Exercise more, sleep more, do the ice baths, do the saunas, do the fasting, do the, these are all like it. And there's going to be a time where we have that magic pill for very specific things. But until then, it takes time and effort. And, humans are lazy, they're sort of predominantly lazy human being. That's part of homeostasis. It's like, don't waste energy. Let me maintain the fat that I have on my body. Let me not expend more energy than I need, so that when there is a famine, I can survive. And that's how humans have survived. So, we do, and back to that said principles of challenge your systems, challenge your body, challenge your systems, burn up all the sugar that's stored in your body, and then replenish it.
Yeah.
We're replenishing too much more than we're actually burning.
Personally, I'm doing, it almost is like unlocking a superpower. And I'll tell you what I mean. The first one is when I do a fast and I get about 12 hours in, I go through that intense hunger. And those hunger pangs are usually the moment that I used to give in. But what I learned is those hunger pangs, if you fight through them for about 45 minutes, that's when your body switches from burning carbohydrates into ketones. And when you pass that point, the ketones actually give you this almost super ability to think a little bit more efficiently. And once I realized like that's the switch and the reward, I literally said, all right, I'm waiting for this. Come on, let's get through that 12th hour. Or the other one was when I first started doing cold bath, or ice baths, I was like, oh God, I can't, like, this is the worst. And then I started realizing I get high off the whole thing. And you'd be like, wait, you feel this much better and I sleep this much better. And by the way, I can recover faster so I can go push myself in the gym. And I think if we can learn to realize that you get so much comfort and so much positive in the uncomfortable, then we start to mobilize ourselves a little bit more seriously. But it's just getting over that big mental hurdle.
Yeah, it's totally that. You get over it and you'll realize the benefits. And, sometimes it takes a little bit of dedication to be able to get to that point where you can reap the benefits. But definitely when you sort of overcome the tough times and you can push through, I mean, the benefits are so addictive. It's like you want that every day and you're willing to sort of put yourself through those stresses for the rewards on the other side.
Well, Dr. V, listen, you are incredible in, I think, what you've seen and in what you've helped people accomplish. I know you have convinced me wholeheartedly that I'm going to make sure I see a chiropractor this weekend. And I don't say that jokingly. I mean it. Like, I will dive headfirst into this and go test a couple of them out until I can find, quote unquote, the perfect fit for me. Or maybe it's two, in your case. Yeah. And I really, I think, admire the fact that you have taken a different approach, which is just a bunch of weights and protein, but really are looking at the whole person and their mindset for longevity. And so, we are grateful for the time that you spent with us.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, Saad, and congratulations on your success and really changing people's lives and your impact you're having on the world in this health and longevity field.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, honestly, after our last conversation, I felt incredibly connected to say, like, hey, we're kind of cut from the same cloth, and I've got a lot of things we can learn from you, and hopefully we'll do something even bigger in the future here.
No, for sure. Would love it. I think we have to. I think it's to come. We're both sort of tapping and knocking at the door of something, really impactful. So let's do it.